Okay, so recording is started. And so let's get rolling here. So if you have any questions at all, we'll definitely have some time for questions toward the end. And then, of course, the afternoon will have lots of time for questions. But in the meantime, if there's something that you just want to catch as we go along there, you can certainly hit the button down below. There's a little yes arrow or check mark that you can hit as we go along, and I'll certainly be happy to stop and address that. But again, we will hit lots of questions in the last half of this. So our goal here today, so just quick reminder, our goal yesterday was mostly to take kind of the 20,000 foot view of what this is all about. What is WCLN? What is an LMS? What happens when you put them together technically? What happens in your classroom if you put them together, or in your program or whatever you're doing with it? What could it look like for a remote teacher to integrate the two? If you didn't want to fully integrate the two, but just wanted to yank some ideas from the site and put them into some other location, what would that look like? So we spent a fair bit of time yesterday just kind of looking at it from that level, seeing if there's something that catches you that, yeah, this would be interesting. This is something that I could use given my situation. Now, on the flip side of that, or on the next stage of that, is the question of, yeah, I think that I'm either interested in learning more about how this would look if I did the whole Moodle WCLN package and brought it into my classroom, and or if I for sure plan to do that, what's my survival guide to kind of move ahead with that? And that's what today is about. Today is about you've decided to do this, or you're really seriously thinking about doing this, and now it's time to take that second step into managing your course. What are we going to do? I'm going to shut off my email here because I get all these little alerts showing up, and that's going to be distracting. Okay, so basically, let's jump right into it. And again, basically, it'll probably take about 20 minutes to go through some of the discussion, and then we'll open it up to lots of questions. Now, my way of looking at this presentation is that I'm throwing a lot of things at you, not with the idea that you're taking piles of notes and that you're gonna remember all this, you know, even if you have your students starting next week and you're gonna have all of this in the forefront of your mind and you're just gonna be able to solve problems left and right. Really, there's no way of kind of accomplishing that in a day, but what I was hoping to do today was just jump through a lot of different topics and basically plant those seeds in your mind so that when you run into little issues and stuff like that, you stop and you remember that, in fact, oh, I remember that guy talked about a way to solve that, or I remember that little problem being discussed and a little story about that, and yeah, I know where to go and track down that answer now. So really being able to jump in and do this is, one, knowing what's possible and kind of having some guidelines as to good practices. And then two is, when you run into something that's a bit confusing or you can't quite remember, where do you go search for the answer? And so the goal here today is hopefully to get you prepared so that you're not nervous stepping into it. Not totally unnervous, because I mean, there is a learning curve here, but that you are aware of some of the things that you're going to hit, so they're not going to hit you by surprise. And then also plant some seeds as to when you run into weird things that you'll be able to think, there is a solution to that. I do remember, and now I know where to go look for it. And that's what we'll aim for today. So, so off we go. So managing your online course. So you've got your online course and you're ready to go with your students. What do you do next? So all of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, we've been providing some support for teachers around BC and Alberta and Saskatchewan for a while now. So we do have a section on the WCLN site called Teacher Support. And so it kind of evolved, but it evolved a little more rapidly when we kind of hit last spring, where suddenly a lot of people were kind of thrown in real fast to online. And so we had to organize that a little bit, prepare it for those who are just kind of getting started in remote learning situations suddenly. So this is a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today, you can find right there. So I'm going to go through it all, and again, planting some seeds that there are solutions, there are some stories you'll remember, stuff like that. But then also, when you can't remember the details, because you're not going to remember all the details today, there's no way, that you can go back and you can look for those details here. And certainly you can still track, you know, people down, myself locally, or within your own district. You probably have some people who are fairly experienced with this kind of stuff that you can track down. But the goal is to look after most of the questions you're going to run into. So one thing to note, WCLN Teacher Support, again, all of this stuff is free. It's just for you to access. You don't have to worry about any of that. Being able to make an account there and access all this stuff is totally up to you and free. Let's get started. First thing, you get a new course, and one of the things, and this is actually a little bug, so throwing it right out there. If you get a course that somebody's restored for you, if it happened to be an SG23, then that might be me restoring for you, or for all the other districts, you'll have somebody restore a course for you. One of the little bugs that is related to the way that the courses are laid out, in other words, when you lay them out, you see all those pictures at the top that send in, it's kind of a graphical dashboard interface for your students. And the students like that interface. It's kind of a nice, clean way of looking at what the course is all about and everything. The one disadvantage to that interface is sometimes it confuses the courses into not being sure how many units there were. So in your district, if you're a principal or an administrator, somebody looking after the administrative side of the Moodle site, you'll want to be aware of this and perhaps send it out, or at least watch for it when you're restoring courses. It's a really, really quick and easy fix, but you just want to make people aware of it. So I sent this out to all the people who were in the discussion forum on the WCLN site. You know, hundreds of people who got an email about this. Just double check your course, just make sure all the units are there. If you're grabbing Math 8 and there's only 2 units, you probably know that there's a problem there. But this is a little area that you can go and just double check your course. So it's more of a heads up for something. And of course, if you go to the WCLN and Teacher Support and you go down a little bit, check for orphaned units. And what this looks like in your course is generally you just have a lot less units than you expected. And it's not as though they're not there, it's just that you and your students can't see them until you open them up, make them available. And again, it's a real quick fix, but I'm just trying to make everybody aware of that so you don't get confused. How to enroll students in your course. So you've got your course, whether you customized it a little bit or you're just going to start off with the course and then customize later on. Whatever the situation, you've got your course, it's sitting on your local server at your district. And so now, how do you get your students into your course? So there are a number of ways of doing this. If you're dealing with just one student, then you can just go into your course and under users, just enroll a student. And I'll show you how to manually enroll it. But the more common way to do it is if you have a group, let's say you have 25, 30 students in your class, and you want them all to be in this course. Now, that doesn't mean that they all have to do the whole course or that you're all in, that you sign some contract, they have to do it. Once you have all the students in the course, you can by all means just say, okay, that's just for your supplemental knowledge to, you know, if you're away for a day, we'll make reference to how you can go in and check things. It could be that you're just using it for the occasional game, or it could be that you're using it for a blended purpose, kind of like what we talked about all these options yesterday. But either way, you probably want to get all of your students into that course. Now, within Moodle, there's a thing called an enrollment key. And so basically, what you're going to do is you're going to go into the course, and I'm not going to go through all the step by step. That's all found on this page, so you can go back and get the step by step. I just want to share the concept so you can kind of envision how this is going to work, and then you can worry about the details once you have your students ready to go. The concept is that in the course, you can go into the enrollment area and you can say, I want to set an enrollment key. Now, what you do is on your first day of class, or first day that you decide you're ready to get your students into that course, let's say first day, and you have all your students there and you say, okay, everybody, I want you to all make an account, and depending on your Moodle server, it'll be all, you know, a little bit different, but making an account is fairly typical on a Moodle site. And so everybody make an account, okay? We'll take your time, make an account. Make sure you don't make a typo in your email address. That's kind of a headache because then they don't get their confirmation and stuff like that. So make sure you get your email address correct and all that kind of stuff. Once they've made the account, then you ask them to go and click on your course. Okay, go find my course. It might be planning 10, or that's out of date. Okay, CLE. It might be CLE at OKM, for instance. And so the students, you tell them where to find it. They go click on it and it says, put in the enrollment key. So there you are standing at the front of the class. Has everybody clicked on my course? And like, oh, I can't find it. Okay, I'll walk over there and help you. Okay, everybody's clicked on the course and it's all asking for an enrollment key, right? So at this point, you just say, okay, the enrollment key is, I see Jody in the list, Jody 123. And so everybody type Jody 123 in the enrollment key and hit enter. And then on your side, you'll be able to see all these students going blip, 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 and all these participants will be added to your course. So now you walk around, you say, no, 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 that was Jody 123, not 1234, and you get everybody in. But at the end of this, basically you've opened the door and told people the way to open that door, and they all stepped into your class. And some teachers at the end of that session, once everybody's in, they'll maybe add a 4 or 5 at the end, just so that it's in a way, it's closing the door behind them. And whether you decide to do that or not is totally up to you. Some teachers find that their students now told their friends about this thing, and now they have their friends jumping in so they can get some supplement because their math teacher didn't do this and they want to look at some of the videos or something, which you may decide is fine, but a lot of teachers find it confusing. Like, who's this extra student who showed up here? Like, they're not on my grade book. I don't recognize that name. And so it might get a little bit confusing at that point. So quite often, again, once you have all your students in, then you'll just turn, add a couple digits to your enrollment key so that it's now a new enrollment key and you don't have people arbitrarily showing up in your course. So in a way, and that's just closing the door behind them. I see a couple in the group chat. Should we require that they use their district email or their personal email? That is totally up to you. We've been doing this a long time locally and using it in the classrooms and stuff like that. We have quite a few teachers who do that. And we've tried it both ways. For a while there, some schools said, no, we want all of our students to be using their district email address. The downside of that is there are, or at least at that time, there were a lot of students that didn't regularly use their district email address, so they'd forget their password and they'd get notices and they'd say, well, I didn't see that deadline because it must have went to some other account or whatever. And so we kind of stopped doing that, and we said, use the email address that you use most often. I don't care if it's the district email address. Use whatever you use commonly. Technically, it doesn't really matter which email address, like from the Moodle site point of view, it doesn't matter which email address they use. So you can ask around. If there's some district policy that requires all communications to use their district email address or something like that, then use the district email address and tell your students they're going to have to check it regularly. But in general, it doesn't matter which one. Where do we get the enrollment key? Okay, you are the one who makes the enrollment key. So when basically that was kind of the details that I said. You can kind of go to that site and look at, you know, step one, go to here, step two, enter the enrollment key. And when you enter the enrollment key, you make it up whatever you want. So, you know, whatever you think adds a tiny bit of security, but is easy to spell and that most of your students aren't going to mess up. And of course, you can adjust it at any point. So it doesn't have to be too fancy. Really, all it is to keep the majority of the people out. And then you're going to tell this class they're all going to enter this thing. So you try not to make it too complicated from a spelling point of view, or else you end up walking around a lot trying to fix people's spelling. But beyond that, whatever you want. We have a Moodle WCLN classes. Why isn't it able to put in a parent email address and a student email address? That would help. Okay, so from a Moodle point of view, putting in a student and parent email address. Okay, so basically the way that Moodle works is it allows for one email address associated with that account by default. Now, a lot of districts use the WCLN progress report, and we brought it up a little bit yesterday, and we'll talk about it more today. And in that case, what it does is when you load that, it makes another field that is additional email addresses. And so in other words, by default, there's just one email address with each account, and that's the student's email address. In general, I mean, some parents, especially with elementary students, might say that they want a parent address with it or whatever. But in general, it's just that student's email address. If you load the progress report, then you can add another parent address. And what that does is it allows when you send out your weekly reports. And for our DL program, we send out weekly reports, and that allows parents or maybe LATs at a school, or if somebody, you know, Aboriginal advocates at a school who are trying to keep track of a student, or VPs or whatever, you can add those additional email addresses in there, and they'll also get a weekly update on how that student is doing. And yes, we will get more into the progress report as we go along for sure. One last thing for me to read. Would this email be reset in any way if there's a reset in the district site or completely standalone? Yeah, this is a standalone account here, that is email address. There are some districts that LDAP the account so that when you change it in one area of the district, it can change in others and stuff like that. That's not typically done with the LMS. It can be done. It just takes a little bit of coordination with your local technical department in order to do that. Carrie, I send them out for Friday. Yeah, okay, so yeah, Carrie here is part of our DL program, and so yeah, she does an awesome job with the progress report and alerts parents and advocates of all kinds how her students are doing every week. And so yes, we'll get into the progress report more. Can't find where to do the enrollment key. Okay, so okay, how about we just go through this, and then I'll be happy to go back to that data, and we'll go specifically into an example course and show you where that enrollment key is. So for sure. So let's kind of roll with the big ideas, and then we'll go back and hit any details. So. Okay, so that's the bit about enrollment. So again, enrollment key, if you have large groups, is probably your best idea. If you are just kind of in a situation where sometimes I get an email from a VP over at a school, and they say, yeah, we would like to add one student to Math 8 because they're really struggling. So on our site locally, we have one that's called District Support, a category, and I just have a bunch of single courses in there. And so in that case, I may add the teacher into that course, or the VP in this case, as a teacher, and then I may add that student. And in that case, I'm just going to manually move them in. 1 or 2 or 3 students, I'm just going to manually pull them in. But if you're talking about a big group, then manually becomes a bit annoying, and the enrollment key is much faster. So, okay, so I'll stop with the enrollment, but again, we will have time later today to get into the details and show you examples of putting in enrollment keys and getting into the details. I'm kind of, my main goal is not to get into the details right now, but more to kind of throw those ideas out so that you can kind of envision what you're going to do minus the details, and then we can kind of hit those details a little later. Okay, so on to the next thing. Okay, so you've enrolled your students, and your students are all happy, they're in the course. Maybe you had to deal with a couple kids who mistyped their email address, and so you had to work with that. And so you've had a few little burps in the system, but now it's all clean a couple days later, and everybody's in the course, and they're looking at the videos or whatever you want them to do in the course. Everybody's kind of cool at this point. Within the couple weeks, you're going to start getting assignments or tests being done. So now you're at the second step, is what do you do about that? And so now it's kind of, you're in the situation of grading student work. Now, if you're in a classroom setting, you may decide, well, just bring it in on paper and leave it in a pile on my desk, you know, on Friday if it's due then or whatever. You do have the option to tell them to submit it within the course. And there are some advantages to that, and that is that you have a document of every submission. If there's ever a question of anything, you have it in the course. You can go back and say, oh, well, your Unit 1 assignment looked a lot similar to this person's, or, you know, let's go back and see how you did there. You have the actual document, you have the marking, you have the feedback, everything all documented by assignment and by student. So really easy for you to track down. It's like you have this nice big filing cabinet that keeps everything in order. In order to get students, and I'll get a little off track here on how students will be submitting their work before we get into how to grade it, if you don't mind. Basically, when you have a student who maybe finishes an assignment, let's say a learning guide or something like that, again, multiple choices on how you want to deal with it. But the default is that you ask a student to scan it and submit it. And a lot of you right now are like red flagged. Like when I ask students to scan things, it turns into a big headache because most of them don't have scanners and all this kind of stuff. But as we talked about yesterday, in this day and age, particularly in the last year, technology with cell phones around scanning and making multi-page PDFs has improved a ton. It's actually really, really easy for students to take their document, set it on a desk, make sure the lighting is even, you know, doesn't have to be amazing lighting, just has to be reasonable. And they take a picture of each of the pages, and once they're done with the pages, they say it all becomes one document and send it to themselves, and now they can upload it into your course. And the advantage to that is now you have it documented there, and it will flag you, and you'll go in and you'll mark it online. And marking it online has many different forms. You can either just kind of have a written feedback and give them a mark, or sometimes there is a built-in markup thing where you can go and put check marks beside it and little flag areas. Carrie, for instance, doing English 12 a lot. She ends up doing some, I think you did some of it marked up on the site, and I think the markup has improved for 3.9. But I know that she also found it easier to download them and just use Adobe to check it up, like Acrobat, in order to check it up and provide some feedback and then upload it to them again. Whatever your marking technique, and really, if you have them pass it in by paper, it's not some huge disadvantage. It's just you're not taking advantage of the organizational feature there. But it still ends up in their gradebook. So either way is good. So yeah, Carrie put a little note in there of how to use a document scanning on your iPhone and iPad and stuff like that. But I'll also point out that on the WCLN site, we talked about this real briefly yesterday. Just see where we have teacher support. Just to the right of that is student support. And under that, we have how to submit your assignments using your phone, or how to scan using your phone. And so if you have students that like, let's say that you wanted people to use the submission thing, you can just go tell your students to go there, and it has specifically for an iPhone, how do you do it? And then a couple of the apps that will do it as well. So if when I said you can get them to submit it online and that was kind of a red flag to you, yes, 5 years ago, that was kind of a pain in the ass for sure, is that you have a lot of students who don't have scanners, and using the phone was a bit tricky and stuff like that. These days, pretty darn easy. Even the student that's not real technically savvy, they'll be able to figure it out pretty quick. Okay, so back to, sorry, got off on a little tangent there, but back to how to grade student work. So if you end up having a student who, or an assignment, let's break this into two categories. One category are those students or those teachers who are going to be running this in their class, and they are running it on a regular schedule or synchronously, and their due dates are kind of common among the class and stuff like that. Then marking is really actually pretty darn simple, because all you would do is you just go, and this is kind of assuming that they all uploaded it in. You just go to that particular assignment, just click on it in your class and hit view grade all of assignments, and all of the assignments will come up, and you just go one to the next and grade them. And in many cases, there's a rubric that's built right in, and you just click on the different parts of the rubric and it automatically tallies it up and puts it into the grade book for you. So, so basically, using, again, some people use Moodle, but they don't use the gradebook. They keep track of their grades somewhere else. I don't really understand that. You know, maybe they got used to some other grading program, but quite honestly, that you're adding work to yourself that you really don't have to. The gradebook within Moodle will take all the quizzes. It'll automatically put in the grades. Anything that you mark in this area, it'll automatically put that into the gradebook. It'll come up with a grade so that any student at any time can click on their grades, and it'll bring up exactly what they got and everything. And also, when we get to the progress report, all of those grades will be tallied onto a nice little table, so you can send them home so everybody sees exactly when they submitted the assignment, what grade they got on it, all that kind of stuff. What's their current grade in the course? What portion of the way are they through the course? All of that kind of stuff is available to you if you use the grade book. So is it, you know, there's certainly no requirement for you to use any part of this. I'm just trying to make you aware of what's available. And to me, I would really encourage you to take a strong look at the grade book, because those who are out there in the classrooms, and I chat with them and they say, yeah, I've been using Moodle for this, but yeah, I keep my gradebook this. And I kind of like, why? Why would you do that? So anyways, it's something to keep in mind. As far as those who are part of a DL program, perhaps you have a situation where students are working asynchronously, just simply meaning that you have some students who just joined the class and are working on Unit 1, and you have some students who are halfway through the class, Unit 5, and you have some students that are finishing the class. You have students all over the place. And so if you had to do it this way for that kind of student, you would end up having to go into, like, each morning you go to every assignment in every darn course and click on view the submissions to see what marking there is to do, and that would be a royal pain. So there are marking blocks, and what they do is they bring all that marking together into one place. And so at this point, I kind of told the story yesterday that we've just updated to 3.9, and we're waiting for the marking blocks to catch up. And so I have faith that by you know, early mid-September, that by the time all the teachers are starting to get lots of assignments in, that there'll be a marking block, or else I will not be popular. But basically what the marking block is, it does is when I sit down in the morning and I want to look after all the marking at the beginning of my day, it will say, oh, in Physics 11, in Unit 1, you have Dana is waiting for her Unit 1 learning guide to be marked. in Unit 5, Sally's waiting for something in a quiz to be looked after. In Unit 7, and then in my other class. And so basically I can just jump through my marking. It will tell me exactly where to go, what part of my course, who needs marking, and I can clean up my marking in a reasonable amount of time versus going searching for marking. So a marking block, if you're in a synchronous kind of scheduled system, marking blocks, who cares? They're not really that advantageous. If you're in an asynchronous situation where people are all over the place, definitely make sure that your site administrator puts a marking block sometime during September. When the marking starts to build up, it will really help you out a lot. So, all right, I'm going to catch up with a little bit of reading here. In the past, submissions were going to a different email other than the teachers. Okay, okay, so basically when somebody submits an assignment in Moodle, it doesn't really go to an email address, it just ends up in the course. So for me, I don't send out alerts to myself when something comes in, or else my email would be even worse than it is now. There are some teachers that say, I want to be alerted every time somebody submits something in one of my courses. And that's fair enough. Maybe you have a small number of students spread among a lot of different courses and you just want that alert to kind of get you in there. So you can turn on alerts and you can have it ping you every time there's a submission in there. Like I say, for myself, that I have no interest in that, because when I sit down to mark, I try and do my marking most every day. And when I sit down to do it, I want to kind of aim to get a bunch of marking done in an hour so then I can get on to other things. I do not want to spend the rest of my day looking at little pings of there are things coming in. So as far as when you're talking about an email address, what it does is every time that there's a submission, if you have that turned on, it will email whoever's identified as a teacher or a non-editing teacher in that course. So if you have a CEA that's also in there looking around at how people are doing, it will send a notice to both of those people. So if you turn that on, and reading that note and it's going to some email other than the teachers, then you just have to check your settings, because the way that it's set up is that alerts only go to teachers and non-editing teachers. Are there restrictions? Finished grade 1. You can put restrictions in. In other words, you can set conditions that you can't get into Unit 2 until you're done the Unit 1 test and stuff like that. And we've all kind of played around, those of us who've been doing it a while, we've played around with that. And I would say that in general, I quit using that. And the reason I did was I just found that it confused students a little too much. Suddenly they're looking at it and they don't see it, but they see a conditional thing, and then suddenly it appears. And I want them to be able to, if they can't come in for a test on Friday, for Unit 1 test on Friday, I don't want them to be stuck, or, if they're trying to work ahead, go ahead, start into Unit 2 and then write the test on Monday or Tuesday and be halfway through Unit 2. I don't care. But that's speaking more of a senior crowd. Perhaps in an elementary crowd, there's other challenges. I don't know. But leaving it wide open, I would say maybe 1 out of every 100 students will do things a little bit out of order. And then I kind of basically give them a yell and say, look, these courses are built to kind of build on concepts. I'm not going to let you write any more tests until you kind of calm down and decide, that if there is a good reason for doing things out of order, talk to me. But I don't run into that as a major problem. The vast majority of students, putting the conditions on for me isn't worth it. Corey, if you set up, so that's Carrie answering, thank you. As well, you can hide and yes, you can certainly hide areas, or you can turn on that they're only available for a certain time. There's all kinds of little conditional things that you can use. Again, I find them more confusing to the students than useful, just based on my personal thoughts. But yeah, of course, feel free and experiment and see what your challenges are. Maybe in your particular situation, they'll prove to be useful. Okay, so bear with me, let me go back. Grade students' work. So I think that's enough to kind of get a big picture of what's involved in grading. You know, once you have, it's really tough to get you into the mindset of grading until you have some assignments sitting in your inbox. And at that point, maybe note to self, coming back here and taking a look at this part of the site so that you can, you know, take a look around and remind yourself of a few of the details when you have a little group in there. Would hide assignments to students to the class. Sorry, I'm just catching up a little bit of reading. Just the questions to students cannot share their quizzes. Yes, certainly. Yeah, we'll get into the quiz side of things a little bit as well. So lots of good points coming out there in the chat area. Okay, let's move on from the grading. Okay, so now we get into testing. So maybe we'll be able to hit some of those things that are popping up here right now. So you have students who are coming up to the end of Unit 1 and it's time for a test. Now, if you're in quite a few of the WCLN math or science courses, they actually have quizzes along the way. And those quizzes basically give students an opportunity to try it out and get familiar with you know, a randomly generated test. And it's an opportunity to kind of decrease that apprehension as they approach a real test. And so, you know, some students seeing unit test 1, they'll do whatever they can to avoid actually having to do it. But if they have a couple quizzes, I find that it works pretty well to say, you know what, those quizzes that you've done, they actually are pulling from the same database as your test. So if you can do well on those, that gives you a bit of feel. So if you struggled with those, go back and review them. You know, we can talk about them, or there's solutions within each quiz, like we talked about yesterday, built into the tests. When they do them, they get feedback immediately and it gives the full solutions. In the math courses, most of those solutions are in video form. It shows them how they could have done the question. So by the time they're done quizzes, they're pretty darn comfortable. And if you kind of talk to them like that, like, yeah, if you go back and look, if you did all right in the quizzes, or you feel like you do all right in the quizzes, then the test isn't much different than that. And sometimes the anxiety goes down a little bit. Now, let's talk about the tests themselves. In the test, by default, we assume that most teachers want some security around their test. That is, they don't want students to be at home and knock off the test in the evening with their cousins sitting beside them and their books open and stuff like that. Now, the tests, you can use them how you want, but the assumption is that most of you are going to want your tests secured so that the students have to do it in a secured environment. So we put passwords into those tests by default. And so if you want to know what those passwords are, you can certainly go, I showed you yesterday, in the confirmed teacher area, not only does it have all the teacher keys, but it also has all the test passwords. But that's not your only way of getting it. In other words, if you kind of can't find that and you're in a rush or something like that, you just go into the quiz, hit edit settings, and under extra restrictions, you can see the password. On here, you can see the little magnifying glass. That you just click that and it'll show you what the password is. And of course, you, as a teacher, you can see that. And of course, none of your students can see that. Now, you can go in there and just look at what the password and go with the password that's in there for now, or you can make your own passwords within your course. And again, we always suggest that people make their own passwords. If they're comfortable with that, go in there and say, yeah, I'm gonna have a password for Unit 1 test. And you can go in there, because click on that pencil and you can type in your own password. So the passwords aren't, I get, you know, emails from around the provinces kind of like, you know, what is the, you know that you can just look that in there, right? Like you can just go click edit settings and it's right there. And so, yeah, it's more of an awareness thing. You'll probably get a list of passwords from the people who signed you up, or you can go in and you can look in the confirmed area and see the passwords. But bottom line is, who cares? You can go look it up in your course anytime you want. So to change or remove passwords, again, this is more of a, you know, don't try and not expecting you to memorize how to do this, but just a note that when you get to your first test, I remember that guy talked about test passwords. Oh yeah, if I go back to the teacher support area, there's all kinds of stuff on there that we can look after as far as tests. And so yes, you can come here, you can look at the passwords, you can change the passwords, you can do whatever you want. And so basically what's common is that if you're in a classroom and you have, you know, 25 people all ready to sit there, you say, okay, everybody sit down, set aside your stuff. What I want you to do is I want you to click on the Unit 1 test, and it will ask for a test password. And you made up your own password, so now you can say the password today is Thursday is cool, whatever. They type it in and everybody's into their test. Everybody has a different test because what each of those tests did was it pulled random questions. So what we do when we make tests is we say questions 1 and 2 are randomly chosen questions from a group of 10 in a category that is the first topic in that unit. And so each student is going to get the different first 2 questions, and the whole test is based that way. So now security is a little less, you know, of an issue. And if you see someone looking over the shoulder and, you know, of another student and kind of jotting down things, you can smile and know that, oh, well, they're going to be, you know, unhappy when they realize that, you know, they're doing 2 quite different tests and stuff like that. So anyways, that's in a classroom setting, that's quite often how tests work. In a remote setting, doing tests can be a little more challenging for sure. And so in the typical DL environment, we say that the person has to drop in and do the test at a site. In our remote time there, where that wasn't possible, we had to come up and be a little bit more creative. And so I don't know if I listed in here. Oh yeah, there it is. So basically, we did put together a system for you to, and so we all got to try these different methods out. And actually, I had an opportunity to talk with quite a group of people from around the province and what they were doing, and kind of tried to put it together into the best ideas from everybody. And so, yeah, we do have, if you're going to try and do it remotely, then we did put together a bit of a system for doing it remotely. And basically what it involves is mostly on the student end is they would run Zoom on their phone, and then they would just set the phone in a way that shows their screen and also shows their desktop. And that's really the main things that you're looking at, is that if they're kind of communicating on the desktop, you know, having, you know, being able to chat in another session of Zoom open or whatever, and they're chatting with somebody else and getting answers or whatever, that's part of it. And then seeing their desktop and that they're not talking with somebody else. And so, yeah, I was actually able to do like 40 tests at a time using that. And so I would just basically tell them, okay, everybody, here's how we're getting into the test. You're going to leave that Zoom on. And what I did was I divvied everybody up into their own breakout rooms. And then it's nice and quiet. And then I can just jump from room to room. And because it's sitting there, they don't even know when I'm there or not. So I just pop in, and then they hear, hey, James, how's that test going? And this startles them a little bit. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's going good. Oh, man, that guy's watching over my shoulder the whole time. And so, okay, well, you let me know if you have any challenges with the test or anything like that. You let me know. I'll just keep popping around. And so basically, it kind of creates that environment that you're walking by and peeking over everybody's shoulder as they do the test. And so, yeah, and technically, I didn't really have anybody with any problems. I kind of put it out there and thought, I'm sure I'll have a few people that have to redo the test another day because they got confused on things. But yeah, it worked pretty solid. So for those who are doing it in the classroom, pretty simple. You can just have the test password and get everybody going at the same time. For those who are doing remote, you may come up with some cool ideas of your own, but here's one here that seems to be pretty successful for people. I'm going to catch up a little bit of reading, and I see that Carrie's answering lots of questions, so that's awesome. Is there anything that, okay, well, I'm just gonna keep rolling along. It looks like Carrie's answering piles of questions. Yeah, breakout room is a Zoom thing. And so if I wanted to right now, I could go up here and I could just say, create breakout rooms, one per person. Or I could say like 50 breakout rooms and divvy everybody up into each breakout room, and it'll automatically put them into each breakout room and distribute it. So it's got a nice little feature in that as soon as I say we're going to breakout rooms, goodbye, I'll be popping in, and I just go make breakout room, one per breakout room, enter, and they're all in their own breakout rooms. It happens in about 30 seconds. So nice little trick to use. What is the reason that you do not recommend printing it? Okay, as far as printing out tests and stuff like that, you can if you wish. It means everybody will have the same test, and it means that there'll be no automatic marking done for you, and it means that it won't go into the grade book automatically for you. So I can think of lots of cons for printing out tests, but if in your scenario you decided that this is just going to work best for me, then great. It means that you'll have to manually mark it. It means that you'll be collecting everybody's. It means that if people are looking over at the other person's, that there'll be a different, they'll be the same test, and then you'll have to collect them all and enter them all into the grade book. And if you want a little, you know, retro day where it feels like the old days, you know, that might be a way to go. But you know, there are a lot of advantages to just using the online tests. So, okay, so we talked about proctoring tests, and again, certainly, you know, lots of options. We just kind of, this proctoring thing was a big thing back in kind of April, I guess it was, and so I spent a fair bit of time just talking to lots of people at lots of different districts, and who thinks they have the best way to write or to proctor online exams, and collected all those and put together, you know, something that hopefully took most of the ideas from each of them and put them together. So that's proctoring exams. And again, any of these things, we can come back and talk more details when we get to kind of question time, but hopefully I just kind of plug that into your brain so you have an envision on, you know, how things might work for you. All right, groups. All right, so now you're creating a test, and maybe you have somebody else in your school comes along and says, ooh, I kind of like what you're doing. You know, your socials 8 looks pretty cool. Didn't realize that was even possible. Could I, you know, what should I do? And so there are some options as far as whether if you have multiple teachers teaching the same thing and you're kind of trying to figure out how this might best be sorted out. So a couple options here. One is that each person in your school decides that they want their own copy of the course. And fair enough. That's probably the most common thing that I get requests for locally, is that somebody comes along and they say, I want a copy of Socials 8 to work with my group, and just give it to me and I'll put my students in and we'll get going and all is cool. And great. Sometimes I get a little group of teachers and they say, you know what, we're a little intimidated by doing this on our own, but if we kind of come together. And one example is, I mentioned it yesterday, one example is that we have a group of 3 grade 4 teachers and a CEA, and they're all kind of look after all the grade 4s and in a school. And they said, we want to work together and we want one class that we can all, so we can kind of divvy up things. And so what we did was we took a few math lessons, a few science lessons, and then they kind of created from there, and off they went. Now, basically what they did was they just made groups. So for each teacher had their group and their students were in there. And that made it easy for them to only mark students from their class. So groups is a possibility. In other words, having your own course is still probably the most typical thing that teachers ask for. But it is possible for you to have one course, let's use a senior example, one Math 10 course that a whole bunch of people are using, and each of them has their group just to make the marking and the communications a little simpler. The disadvantage of having groups in your course is that usually at the beginning, everybody's happy. Okay, you know, I got my group and everybody's working along, and I can ask my friend over there, I don't get how to mark this one. This one's a little weird, and they're all talking and they're all can look at each other's and all that kind of stuff. There's advantages to it, certainly. The disadvantage is usually after that initial learning curve happens and the people start to go like, you know what? I want to put my own introduction. I want them to skip this lab. And the other person's like, well, no, that lab, actually, I think that's pretty important. And, you know, suddenly they kind of want to deviate in their own directions a little bit. And it's much easier to do that if it's your own class, and much more challenging to do that if you're kind of saying, Mr. Thomas's group is going to be doing this, and, you know, stuff like that. So pros and cons. If you think that it's worth it just to be part of a little teacher group that you're all working together on that, and the consensus may not work out every time, but we're willing to roll with that, then groups is a great plan. If you feel confident that, you know what, I want to get this going, and my friend and I will both have a Math 10 course, but we can talk about it, but we won't be able to see each other's courses necessarily and stuff like that, then get your own course. So basically, I just wanted to bring up the group idea as it is a possibility, and some people use it quite successfully. Can you sort the grade? Yes, you can. You can go in there and you can do your grading and organize it by groups. You can go in there and send messages and only send it to your group. So yes, groups allow you to do a little bit of, you know, that day-to-day functionality kind of stuff. You'll find that if you kind of break it up into different groups, that you can certainly, your day-to-day work will work out fine with the group as your strategy. Can you use groups to make different cohorts? Okay, cohorts are a little different than groups. Cohorts are more the idea that if I have a grade 10 student, grade 10 academic cohort, and I want to call them, and they're all in the same group of courses. And so I want to be able to take that whole cohort and put them into a group of courses and stuff like that. So cohorts aren't used nearly as much as groups, I would say. So I'm more familiar with groups just because I see lots of people that request help with groups, but cohorts, we use it for some technical things, but in general, I don't see a lot of schools use the cohort idea. Are the videos and quizzes compatible with MS Teams? Well, no. Okay, so let's break that up into two things. Videos, the videos that we use are generally our own WCLN YouTube channel, and therefore, yes, videos can go anywhere that, you know, has web-based design. So Teams or Google Classroom or whatever, stuff like that. Quizzes, no. And again, yesterday we talked about LMSs and what they were. Moodle is the most common one in BC. Canvas is out there in a few districts, and D2L is in a couple districts. Those are LMSs, and they kind of have that big overall structure where you have question databases and quizzes and forums and all those things that we're talking about. When you get into something like Teams or Google Classroom, not bashing them because they have their own use. There's lots of cool things that go on in there, but yeah, in general, you're not going to be able to run quizzes and stuff like that, or a grade book or things like that we're talking about. So yeah, it's just kind of a different tool. An LMS you'll find, and I know lots of people are using Teams and Google Classrooms these days, and yeah, for some applications they work fantastic. But if you want the kind of horsepower that we're talking about to be able to do all these different things, then you have to put those behind and look at a real LMS. Yes. Do all courses have quizzes? Okay, so basically, to answer your question, do we say that every course that we release has to have a quiz or test? No. With the math courses and the science courses and many of the socials courses and quite a few of the English courses, quizzes were deemed to be advantageous by the developers. There are some courses out there. All the assessment is based on projects and learning guides and various things like that. So it depends, you know, on the developer and the course that we're choosing. Now, you mentioned that the Math 9 CC, you'll notice that if you look at the WCLN Math 9, yes, it has database. The Math 9 Content Connections one doesn't. Again, yeah, their courses are released without the database and quizzes and stuff, and they have print tests, and you know, some people will look at their stuff. So definitely look at the different options on the site and decide what suits you best. The Content Connections courses have lots of great you know, attributes to them. The videos are really solid and stuff like that. But at this point, they're print tests. If you look at the Study Forge, they have the lessons, but they also have a database and also the WCLN. So just look at the different options, or get your math teachers to look at them and just decide, you know, pros and cons, which one do they want. Our goal as WCLN was, number one, to give you a free option of as many courses as we can. And so if you look at the WCLN math courses, you'll see what you can get for free as a member. If you look at the Study Forge or the Content Connections options, those are ones that have an additional license attached to them. And that's perfectly great. Some WCLN members, they use all the free stuff in all the other categories, and then they say, but we kind of like the Study Forge Math 10, or we kind of like the Content Connections Math 11, or whatever. It's totally up to you. You just have to recognize that if you choose one from Study Forge or Content Connections, that there will be additional licensing that you'll have to pay them. It has nothing to do with us. You can grab the course from us, but then the course won't work until you pay the licensing to those guys. So again, I would just make sure that you chat with the different groups. And yes, thanks, Onkar. With the, you know, both of the Content Connections and the Study Forge in the math area, and the Rosetta Stone in the languages area. And we have a number of partners. And if you go onto the site and look at partners, you do get a reduced, you know, just because we're able to come to the table and say, yeah, we represent the majority of districts in Western Canada. Can you come up with a deal for us? And usually that works out to everybody's advantage. So, so yes, there is a reduced cost for that. So just on the WCLN site, if you decided that the Study Forge or the Content Connections were the ones that you'd prefer to do, then just look under the partners and tell them that you're a WCLN member, and they will give you the preferred pricing. So thanks for the reminder there. Can students upload a picture of their work? Answer questions. Okay, so a question come up as far as can students upload a picture of their work for long answer questions? Okay, so with the math and science courses, that's probably where this would come from more often, is that the work that they're submitting, they have to show their work, right? In many cases, especially in the senior areas, there's multiple steps that they should show. You do certainly have the option to say you can use the little math type in your documents, or you can, you know, whatever your choice is. But for me, I personally say, unless you have a lot of practice with those, it's just going to slow you down drastically. Print the darn thing out, write out your work, and you know, and then you can show little arrows and diagrams and explain it. And it doesn't take you 3 times as long to do it. You're just laying out your work. And then when you're done that document, then I want you to submit it. And again, that goes back to the whole scanning idea. You know, back in the day, that would have been a big issue for a lot of students, trying to figure out how to submit it to me. These days, with the phone and being able to take pictures and make one big PDF that they can submit, it's not really an issue anymore. So yes, as far as being able to show their work in assignments and stuff like that, that's not really an issue if you can either, and again, you can go back to old school and say, bring it in and drop it on my desk if you're doing it in a classroom setting. Or I would suggest that it's not nearly as hard as you think it is to tell your students, no, I want it submitted within the course and I want it submitted as one big PDF document. And go to WCLN.ca under student support, how to scan using my phone. And 99% of your students are going to be like, oh, no sweat. And if one comes in, you can say, oh, well, talk to your buddy there. They figured it out, you know. And so, yes, in this day and age, that is not very difficult. So we talked about groups and stuff like that. I'll keep watching for questions. Again, we should have some time for questions as well. So for in-class e-tests, they can just hand in their, oh, so yes, as far as tests go, generally a lot of the tests and stuff like that are done fully online. So in that case, when you are telling everybody to enter it, what you're doing is you brought in, let's say, a group of Chromebooks and everybody sat down and opened it up and went to your site and logged into your course and clicked on the test and they entered that password and off they go. And as they finish or as the time runs out, all of those tests end up going into your marking if there are teacher marked areas. If not, it goes straight into the gradebook. So, so yes, that will save you an awful lot of time. And so I have had a number of teachers who ended up asking for these courses and Moodle put together, and they use it. Yeah, go ahead, look at I'm going to cover all this stuff in class, so you don't have to worry about the videos and games and stuff like that unless you want to. If you didn't catch on something, go ahead and watch it in the evening to catch up. But the main thing I want the tests, and so we'll do paper, midterm, and final maybe, but we'll use this for unit tests and stuff like that. And just to, you know, make it simpler for everybody and not use as much time, student time nor teacher time and stuff like that. So whatever your strategy, can we access resources for a specific class without opening the class? Okay, so yeah, this goes back a little bit to yesterday's discussion. There's a couple ways that you may choose to use this material. In other words, you go onto the WCLN site, you look around, you say, you know what, all I wanted was a few ideas, maybe a few projects and a couple games and a few videos, and that's all I want. That's enough for me to kind of, you know, send emails and, you know, to the videos or whatever, and that's all I want. So then in that case, you may not be interested in bringing Moodle or Canvas or an LMS into it at all. You may just kind of distribute that. It's more if you wanted the full package, and again, when you get a full package, it's not as though there's any expectation that this is what you must do with this package. It's more, here's everything, you know, do what you want with it. So some people will hide areas. Okay, we're not going to cover that unit in my course, hide. Well, you know what, I have no interest in them doing that quiz, gone. You know, stuff like that. You are more than welcome to do that kind of stuff. And so I kind of had it on schedule to get into more customization, but I see I'm running short on time. I'll keep going, and if you need to go for lunch, but I'll go for at least another 10 more minutes, even though we're running overtime, if that's good. And if that's enough of me that you can take, then feel free to bail, and we'll be back open this afternoon for questions at 12:30. But anyways, I'll carry on just in case you're wanting to stick around, and I'll get through some of the things I wanted to chat about. I didn't realize that I got off track so much that I'm getting behind here. Okay, so actually, in fact, that's kind of the end of the topics of, you know, your first couple of weeks, how do I survive? And so really it's around getting your students in, how do you, you know, mark them once they're in, how do you do the tests, how do you, you know, that if you know that you can get those details somewhere, you're probably good for that first few weeks survival part of your course. So now you got over that first few weeks and you're kind of like, okay, you know what? I think I want to customize my course a little bit. I'm comfortable, I've looked around, my students are doing well, parents are happy, everything's cool. Let's start fooling around and see what I can do as far as making this course a little bit more myself. And so one of the things that if you are in a synchronous situation in a classroom or whatever, in other words, you've got a regular schedule with your group, I would strongly suggest discussion forums. They're challenging to do in an asynchronous situation. That is, everybody's all over the place because, you know, you've got one person comment and maybe a week before the next person gets to that point in the course. And it's hard to keep a flow in a discussion forum. But if you have all the group kind of getting to an area, the discussion forum is amazingly successful. It's very common to see students who in their classroom have a heck of a time speaking up and you know, adding their 2 bits to a conversation. And they sometimes just shine in this kind of environment. You put it there and they have time to sit back and reflect. They don't have to put their hand up. They don't have to speak out loud. They can kind of communicate. They can, you know, and you get more thoughtful responses too, because now they can actually type it out and back up on that sentence. And that might be a little bit too strong for that. And the communications improve drastically over that whole teenage element of being everybody staring at you when you comment in a classroom. So if you are going to go with asynchronous, I would strongly suggest playing around with discussion forums. And so if you go to that teacher area, you'll find how exactly to put a discussion forum into your course. How to hide. So Carrie mentioned earlier about being able to hide areas. And so it is really easy. If you have a book in there and you say, you know what, I think we're going to skip that topic because, you know, that'll run me a little bit short on time, or that's something I usually like to have a classroom conversation and stuff like that. You can go in there and hide a whole unit if you want, or just a book or just a quiz or whatever you want. And they all work pretty much the same. You turn on editing, you go look beside it, it has a little eye icon, and you hide it. It's really easy. There's no reason that, so those of you who feel like, oh, by taking on a course, I'm kind of stuck with this whole package. You're not. You can get rid of whatever pieces you want, whether hide them, delete them, it's your course. Quick little read here. Possible for someone to present her school online if we set in advance about. Sure, I'll record this, and hopefully, I know that there were a number of people who weren't, you know, still in their summer holidays and stuff, and so the recording hopefully will look after some of that. But yes, we can certainly talk about other options there. Pull units from different courses and combine them. Yes, there is. Let's see, do I have that in today's? If not, then I'll certainly tell you how to do that later today. Modify the introduction area. Okay, so this is a common one for those who get pretty good with things and they're getting comfortable with their course. You know, maybe a few months, maybe 6 months, I don't know, whatever it takes for you to get to that point of, you know what, I've got this figured out. Now I'm ready to start mucking around and start working on making some changes to my course. And that introduction, it's a nice general introduction, great, but I want my own introduction. I want my face on there, and I want to talk to my students about specifically my expectations. Great. This day and age, putting together a little video of yourself, even with a webcam, I've seen some really lack of professional where they're sitting back in their chair and they're looking at a, you know, pixely webcam and they're doing it, but it's a good connection. It actually, you know, if a teacher is willing to do that and learn that, it's easy to put it into your course. You can just put it onto YouTube, make your own YouTube channel, and that's easier than you think probably. And then you can replace the intro video in your course with you sitting back and saying, hey, everybody, this is my dog, Max, and, you know, I'm your teacher for this year. And you know what I find really frustrating about assignments coming in, and, you know, whatever you want to say. That little spiel that you do at the beginning of the year, you can put that in your course, and it's a nice way to personalize a course for sure. So we do put some effort into making a nice polished intro video, but we certainly accept the idea that, you know, if a teacher may decide to go in there and add their own personal introduction, and that looks pretty cool in my eyes when I see a lot of people do that. Adding an explanation. So in other words, you're looking in the course and there's an explanation and you think, you know what, I like my explanation more than this guy's explanation. Fair enough. There's a couple options. And so we mentioned it a little bit yesterday, but if you have an explanation that you think, you know what, I have this really cool explanation for this that just clicks with students, and they don't quite capture that in this course. What we would, as an organization and as a consortium where you guys are all members and we all kind of work together, what we would love is if you were to post that in the discussion forum and say, you know what, here's a cool way that I explain this topic that I found in Math 8, section 3.2. You kind of explain it this way, but I find it easier for students to understand if you use this analogy. Cool, that creates a great discussion on our end, because now the developers look back and they're like, oh, I get what they're saying. And it may turn into a discussion of, yeah, but then that kind of, you know, when they get to, you know, maybe it's something where, well, but when they hit grade 11, then that's going to cause some confusion, because then they get into these kind of topics and it creates a good Pro-D. Now this whole discussion comes up and people, on the other hand, it's quite possible that people look at it and they say, sweet, that is a better way to do it. Let's change it for everybody, and off we go, because that makes a lot of sense. It's a better way for sure. So, but on the other hand, it may be a case where you're kind of like, oh, I get why everybody else does it differently. It's just my personal thing because I have this cool story I can tell them in the middle of it, and that helps them remember. Then yes, absolutely. You can add your own page, or you can even make your own book and insert it right into the course. And that becomes your own personal part of it. And then in the future, if it's time to update the course, in other words, the WCLN put a whole bunch of money into you know, improving the database and stuff like that, and you're kind of like, oh, I should definitely update so that I get that improvement. Then you can just take that book that you made and using the sharing cart or whatever program you use and just move it over into your new one, pop it into place, and you get the best of both worlds. So, so yes, as far as adding explanations, you are definitely able to remove explanations from your course or add your own. It's definitely an option there. And so adding new books, we kind of mix those together. Scanning with your phone, we already talked about that. We'll continue to evolve this. So if you say, oh, you know what, there's a new app that's even better than the ones that you point out there. In other words, Cam Scanner was probably the most popular one for a number of years, but Cam Scanner, one of the problems we found with it lately is they're trying to capitalize on the fact that a lot more people are looking to scan, and they made it a lot easier to accidentally buy the $60 version of their app. And so a lot of students kind of click too fast and suddenly they owe $60 and they have to get, you know, stuff like that. So that's why I moved Cam Scanner to the end. And I actually put a little warning in there too. Just be careful when you load this one, as you don't want to suddenly end up owing a bunch of money. It's free typically, but you just have to watch that you don't click the wrong thing. And then under the student area, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but if you are running into reports and stuff like that, where you want students to use MLA or, you know, stuff like that, you can find it in the same area as the scanning with your phone. And yeah, it helps with consistency. So Carrie put together a really nice package there for people to be able to go and just refer their teachers to, or their students to that. And afternoon plan. Okay, so I'm sorry, I ran it a little bit late there. So let's just sum this up. Basically, hopefully that helped you get some ideas, at least big picture ideas. And also note, just if you took anything out of all that, it was just a few big vision concepts, along with the fact that all of those things are explained in detail if you go back to WCLN and go under teacher support. So all of that stuff is there. Remember that, so that when you run into it, you're kind of like, oh, I remember that guy talking about this stuff, but I can't remember the details. Okay, I can go back there. I can find exactly what he was talking about. And usually it's a step-by-step or a video, and you're good to go. So you take that with a bit of comfort. Even if you took no notes, which probably you didn't, you can always go back and there is a summary of all those things. in your new courses, assuming that you may have gotten some new courses lately, I would suggest first thing you do, go look for orphan units and watch that little video and just double check your course. It'll take you 1 minute to double check your course. And if you don't and you have a little bit of orphan unit problem, then you're going to confuse your students. So take the minute and take a look. Yeah, this afternoon, if you set aside the time to work on this kind of stuff, go in there and find the enrollment key and play around with it and see. You could even make your own student account using a different email address or something, and let your student in and use the enrollment key and prove that it works to yourself so you feel comfortable. Yeah, I would suggest going through that teacher support area and just looking at the things we hit on, just so that you're comfortable, that you know that they're there. But otherwise, I'm going to let you go have your lunch. Sorry again for running over. Carrie and I will both be back in the same room from 12:30 to 2:30, or 2 if everybody kind of phases out. And so we'll be there to answer detailed questions. So as you're exploring, come up with some questions, come visit us. That's great. Have a good lunch. Thanks.